one of the hardest decisions you've had to make?
Mm. Okay. Getting married once and then getting married twice. Those were two of the hardest decisions I've had to make.
One of the hardest decisions I had to make.
Shit, I don't know, giving up coffee? Like, no, I'm just kidding. Holy moly. um,
There's like too many.
I really have no idea.
I decided whether I was going to delay graduation or graduate and pursue an MPH or Master's of Public Health. As I prepare for this residency cycle, that's kind of been on my mind all this year, because it kind of determines my future. You know, my goal is to become a pediatrician. You know, and it's tough to get there. And so that decision to delay graduation and finish my courses as of last week was a pretty tough decision.
It was a tough decision for me to finish my education. I always wanted to graduate from college, but I got married at 20. I had your dad at 23. And I kind of wanted it all. I wanted to be a stay-home mom and be with him, but yet I wanted to get this degree. It was important to me. It took 13 years to get that bachelor's degree, but at the very end, the last semester, I just couldn't do it anymore. I was so tired. And your grandpa kept telling me, finish it. And I said, but I have to quit working. You know, we're not going to have enough money. And so he said, no, you've worked so long to do this. You know, your grandpa's always supported me in what I wanted. And so I went back and finished. But that was a tough decision. There were many times I wanted to just give up. Who was I hurting, I kept thinking, by doing it. But I think it worked out.
Leaving my family behind for Chicago, that was really tough, because I was coming up to a place where, you know, I was dating a girl at the time, but, you know, there's always a possibility it didn't work out and I didn't have anything to fall back on. So I think that was probably the toughest decision, was just deciding to make that move.
I think the hardest decision I had to make was several years ago when my physician informed me that I had a nerve that was being compressed severely and I had to have a surgery. And I remember having to sign the paperwork that you're giving authorization for, that, you know, there could be complications. You could maybe not survive the surgery. You could become quadriplegic because it was in my neck, my cervical area. It was a very big decision for me. A frightening one, but probably the best one, I guess.
This is going to sound odd, but we were trying to get our first home, which the house you grew up in. And we had a dog, and it was Janae's first dog. It was Janae's Dusty Red. This dog was the smartest dog I've ever had. He was trained. He would stay up with me late at night while I was going to school at night, because I would work all day. And I would be on the computer, and he would, I cross my ankles kind of when I'm sitting down, and he would put his neck across, his head and neck across my ankles, and this, you know, be laying there on top of me. And I would, you know, I'd say, okay, man, I'm getting ready to go to bed. Go to your room. And I said, go to your room. And he'd just look at me. I said, yeah, go to your room. And he walked to his room. Well, long story short, your mom fed him a steak bone. He tried to bite it, and he ended up swallowing it whole, and it ripped up his insides. And so we took him to the vet, and they basically said, well, it's going to cost you about $2,000 for the surgery, and we can't insure you that he's going to live. I had to decide between the money for the house or Dusty, and we ended up putting him down. And that was tough. That was one of the toughest decisions I've ever had to make.
Hardest decisions I had to make. Hardest decision I've had to make. Coming out. You know, once you realize it and you know it's something that you have to do, it's every day, every moment. It's like you're thinking about it, and of course your brain always goes to the worst case scenario. You know, you're thinking about all this terrible things that are gonna happen, and you're just convinced that it's not worth it. And calling on my family and making those phone calls was something that was really hard to do, but it's something that I needed to do. You know, being 27 already and just kind of living a lie is just not, it wasn't easy, and something I thought about every single day, and that was really tough. But luckily, everyone was receptive about it, and nothing has changed really for me since I've come out.
So I think that probably one of the hardest ones was when I knew that, or kind of came to the realization that I kind of had to just let Austin and Joseph go. The only way I could stop the cycle and at least give them some chance of not being constantly stuck in the middle of just nonsense was to, I would say let them go, but you know, we're still always here. I was losing control, like even inside of our house because of, you know, the influences outside. And so, yeah, I kind of like hoped or prayed or whatever that it would normalize. It's not, and I don't know that it will ever. There was always going to be that toxicity that would make its way in and mess up them and us and whatever. And so that was a pretty hard decision. And then even after that, it was hard for a while not to undo the decision. But yeah, so I'm gonna put that up there.
Deciding to cut someone out of my life that wasn't good for me, even though I still wanted to have a connection with them.
I've had a lot of hard decisions in my life. I don't know if I want to talk about those decisions, but probably a divorce is the hardest decisions ever in my life. So
the hardest decision probably was realizing when I was married the first time that it was time to let go and get a divorce.
I would say the hardest was making the decision to like change the course after me and your dad, and just figure out like what was gonna happen with you guys, and then also making the decision to not put personal issues in front of y'all. Just doing that and making sure that y'all never felt never felt not loved or not whatever.
Hardest decisions I've had to make. That would have been the divorce with your dad. That was a pretty hard decision. Yeah, I love him. I've always loved him. We just weren't in a good place. So, and I wanted to buy the house, and people kept telling me, well, if you're going to buy the house and you're not really sure where the relationship's going to go, then, you know, it's better that you do it now rather than later, because then, you know, it just becomes a nightmare and a headache trying to deal with the separation of assets and this, that, and the other. So, but yeah, that was definitely the hardest decision I've ever made.
Hardest decisions? I guess, you know, one of the hardest decisions was when I left the house and leaving y'all. That was rough. That was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, and probably the hardest time of my life. And being without y'all, not having y'all there with me every day, that was rough. Real rough. Yep.
Letting my dad go. Because he had the stroke, and they told us that we want a feeding tube for him. And he had told me he didn't want anything like that. And he wasn't responding and unable to swallow, so That was hard. I feel like I let him down in some ways, but in some ways I was trying to fulfill what he said he wanted.
Having a child on my own, I didn't ever think I was going to be in the position to be like, I'm living by myself, you know, like, what do you do? Like, I was 20 years old and I don't even know how to take care of myself, much less a human being. So I think that was like a really hard to just man up. And, you know, I'm really glad, not that it was like ever a second thought in my head, but I'm really glad that I have Aubrey, because now, like, you know, I might not ever have another child, and I feel like that was like God saying, like, this is for you, like, I'm giving her to you because this is it. And I feel like that's a big deal. Like, she's everything. So I feel like it was a big decision to decide to be her mom.